Good evening, and welcome to Chaotic Conversations. I'm your host, MAYY, bringing you interesting discussions with interesting people. Tonight's guest is Max Harding, a comic illustrator who uses graphic media to convey philosophical themes. Hi, Max. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your introduction?
Yeah, I record a monthly philosophy meeting with a group of people and
Cool.
right yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It was nice meeting
Of
you,
course.
Mayhem.
So you have a monthly philosophy thing? I haven't actually heard about this, so tell me more about that.
It's pretty cool. It's with a lot of different entrepreneurs, scientists, artists. We all
Mm.
meet up and we speak about how we can help humanity and help the world. We talk about a lot of different things, like
And I wasn't
consciousness.
invited?
I'm not in charge of it.
You're
You
not
have
in
to get an
charge of it.
invite.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I would
Okay.
love to invite you, but
Okay. Are you in charge of invites?
I can ask them. They're pretty
Okay,
chill.
cool. All right. Well, that's cool. That's a cool thing I didn't know. I love when
Wait, I want
my
to.
cult members are in other cults and then I can
Wait,
join them
what's
in.
it like being a cult leader? I've been meaning to ask you this.
Oh man, I mean, we're still pretty small at the moment, but it is cool when people, offer to send me their life savings and whatnot. I had someone offer to send me their life savings, like to go into debt because they didn't have their life
Yeah.
savings yet, and I was like, nah, chill. It's I'm very patient. I'm a very kind and generous cult leader like that. I care about my followers' financial health, like the point of
Oh.
like I don't want them to get into debt for me. Like
Wait,
the go
so
go get a job and contribute to humanity in order to
yeah.
send me your savings. That's
That's a really bold thing to send you their savings. Wait, bro, tell me about the cult. Like, what does it entail? What's your guys' goal or philosophy?
well, I would say I like to say that my philosophy is that you don't necessarily have to agree with everything that I believe in to be part of the cult, but if you hear everything that
Mm-hmm.
I say and then you say, I want to be a part of that, even if you have some
Mm-hmm.
disagreements, then I want you to be a part of that. That's what I mean. So
Mm-hmm.
my central core belief is base reality is the void, which basically means that all of this reality is kind of an illusion, and the only real thing is nothingness, but nothingness and nothingness inhabited by a universal consciousness that is just all knowing and encompasses everything. But that got really boring because nothing happened because all
Uh-huh.
that it was nothing. So it just kind of dreamed into existence all of these different selves for it to
Mm-hmm.
inhabit and interact with itself. So I think acknowledging that everyone has a part of the eternal and the divine in them, but that everyone has
Yeah.
that, and that it's important to recognize it in yourself and to treat that with respect, like to treat
Mm-hmm.
yourself as though you are holy, but then to also treat other beings as though they are holy, not to waste your own time, to give yourself the dignity that you deserve and not live like a worm and like not let other people tyrannize over you or like corporations like Instagram and stuff to steal your attention and turn it into something less useful. I always believe in taking the energy and turning it into something more useful and more interesting in the service of the higher good, and just
Oh.
to treat everyone as an extension of yourself, basically. That's really what
Okay,
I believe in.
okay.
And I think that that core of what what I believe, that informs my answers to every philosophical question. Like my answers about does God exist? What is the meaning of life?
Uh-huh.
What makes a good life? What is ethical to do and what is not ethical to do?
Yeah.
All of these questions, they start with that idea of this is the structure of the universe, or a
Mm-hmm.
close estimation of it as we can do at human language. And it kind of answers all of those questions with just a
Mm-hmm.
logical deduction. Like, if that is true, what would that mean
Mm-hmm.
about what is good and what is evil and why is it bad to do something bad to another person and th those sorts of things. So I think that central belief is central because of its role in answering all the other ones.
Yeah, I really like understanding your premise. I'm gonna restate what you said to you to see if I
Okay,
understand.
sure.
So, the eternity of everything was nothing. And this nothingness got, in a sense, bored or curious. So it started developing cells and more complex life out of just interest, or is it, what was the reason it started developing higher life?
I think there's a lot of different things that maybe at the core, they're all kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Boredom and loneliness are the two that
Boredom
I
and
think are really
loneliness.
important because I think when you're everything, there's nothing for you to relate to. There is no
Yeah.
other if you are everything. And I don't know which came first. I don't know if loneliness came first or separation
Uh-huh.
because we think like we feel lonely because we're separated from other things. But when you unite with everything, then there's nothing to connect to anymore. And maybe that's the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate loneliness. And maybe that caused the separation in order to have
Mm-hmm.
other things to connect with. And I think boredom is not studied enough. Like I looked into, are there any like studies about boredom, books about boredom? There is a drought of scholarly information about boredom, but I think it's actually one of the most interesting phenomenons of like, why does
Oh.
boredom happen? Like, there's some quote from some Indian philosopher or something that is like, the core of humanity's problems is man's inability to sit quietly in a room by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that all of our problems are kind of just like we get bored.
Yeah.
And why? Like, I don't
Wait,
know
do
if
you think
anyone actually
boredom's bad?
understands why. I think that boredom is like being bored is like a skill that we should cultivate. Like I think
Yeah.
boredom is like the one thing that God fears, and if you are brave enough to confront it on behalf
Mm-hmm.
of God, then God will give you its favor for
Mm-hmm.
like encountering the dragon, you'll get the gold. Like I think boredom is really important, and I think it's the thing that leads to
Mm-hmm.
creativity and
Yeah, it
curiosity.
does. Very much so.
But I wonder why do creatures, and it's not just humans either, why do creatures just like when things stop moving, they were like, this feels bad. Like, I don't think we understand that well enough, and I think that's a really important topic for study.
I would assume it comes down to evolution because if there are
Mhm.
systems and organisms that aren't moving, that don't feel that form of discomfort with themselves, ultimately they die. The creatures and organisms that can't really sit with themselves, they can't really be, and they're constantly striving for more and more goals and more things. Those are the ones that are going to continue to like produce and move on.
But you'd think that sometimes it just wastes energy, like if you could conserve energy, like some animals go into hibernation
Yeah.
to conserve energy. And I wonder why that isn't a little bit more common.
Going into hibernation, you need like a lot of ideal circumstances. You need to be
Mhm.
able to gain enough fat and be able to go into a place where you will not be harmed for a long enough period. But yeah,
Mhm.
it isn't very common. I know there's like fish that go into hibernation, but there's not too
So
many
maybe
creatures.
the reason that we get bored is that it's like the amount of prosperity that Western civilization has produced is so much of a change in such a little evolutionary time
Mm-hmm.
span that in the past you really needed to be like working towards your basic survival needs 24/7.
Uh-huh.
And now we have like trust fund kids who are like, I have achieved all of my basic and intermediate needs, time to go do drugs
Mm-hmm.
until I die,
Mm-hmm.
that have a problem that we just have not been faced with before in evolutionary history, I guess. I mean, that's a really interesting take on it, and it's probably very likely. I always want to look at my beliefs as uh, through the critical lens of how informed is this by the type of biological creature that I am? Like,
Mm-hmm.
could a sufficiently advanced octopus come to the same conclusions, Uh, I, I don't know.
But octopus fundamentally think differently. They have
Hmm.
something like they have multiple brains, and the way that we're processing things and the thoughts we come up with, they're limited based on our own cognitive processes at this time. So I've thought about this a lot, like what other organisms would think of like, or higher beings, and it seems impossible to conceive, like the conclusions they would come up with.
Well, I feel like octopi would be more like the idea that everyone is kind of the same person, but in different
Yeah.
places. I feel
Uh-huh.
like a creature that had separate brains, is there communication between the brains of octopi? Because I know that
Yeah.
obviously we have split brains in humans, so that we have like the
Hmm.
corpus callosum or corpus callosum. But
Yeah.
and another thing, this is another tangent, but everyone talks about the left-right brain split, but no one talks about the vertical brain split. Like, of
Oh.
course, there's the different brains. There's the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere,
Hmm.
but there's also the layers like we've got the medulla, and then we've got the limbic system, and then we've got the
Hmm.
cerebral cortex. And I think the vertical split is actually more important than the horizontal split when it comes
Really?
to feeling like we have these different drives, or that like we're at war with ourselves or talking to ourselves or doing something that we wish we didn't do. I
Hmm.
think whenever we're like, oh, I did that thing and I don't know what came over me. I wish I didn't do it, or I just do this thing even though I don't want to do it. I think that's probably like some deeper part of the brain, like your cerebral cortex, which evolved later in
Hmm.
in evolution, is like, I have these thoughts and I want to do this. And then your limbic system is like, no, we're doing this. And then like your medulla is like, no, we're doing that. And that's kind of what's pulling you in all these different directions. I think that's a lot more people overlook that because there isn't like a surgery to split those apart or anything. But I think that's a big
Oh.
split brain thing that no one's talking about.
Yeah, no one is talking about. So, are you more talking about like the deeper emotional processing that we've had for like millions of years versus the more recently evolved outer cortex of our brain that does the higher
Right,
functioning?
right. Well, there's basically, as far as I know, and I have only a cursory knowledge of neuroscience, but there's basically three
Hmm.
layers, and the further down you get, the earlier it evolved. So we've got the lizard brain, which controls like your heart
Hmm.
rate and breathing. That's like your medulla or something, and that we have like almost no conscious control over. Like you cannot voluntarily directly decide when your heart is going to beat, like what
Hmm.
rhythm your heart is going to be at. You can indirectly affect it by thinking of something that scares you or something that calms you down, but you can't, there's no direct communication with that, basically. And then we have the limbic system, which is your emotions and your drives that evolved a little later. And and then on top of that, we've got the cerebral cortex, which is like logical verbal processing. And
Yeah.
that is the most recent. But that's kind of what we tend to identify when we say, I think this, I think that. But then the lower ones have their own will of their own.
Hmm. What do you think it would be like if we split the outer cortex from the inner workings of the brain? Like, what would a person be like?
Well, I mean, when you look at the left-right brain splits, which are the corpus callosotomies, the one that
Yeah.
we do have the procedure to split, it doesn't change much until you like tell them to cover one eye or something. Like it actually, they tend to function pretty much the same as they
Hmm.
always do. So that's the weird thing to me, is that maybe the only thing that it would be affect is that maybe when you uh thought about something scary, it didn't increase your heart rate.
Mm.
Maybe it would be those little blips that we don't even actually very frequently. I mean, they're probably more often than we think. Maybe it would just be someone who's kind of disconnected from their own emotions, where like the thoughts they think and the things they feel and what their body is doing are just kind of completely not communicating with each other at all. And
Hmm.
what we have in a regular person is like these different drives, they're doing a terrible job of communicating, but they are trying to communicate. They're at least communicating through who gets to control the meat suit right now. And that's at least a form of communication by force. But maybe in someone who was really divided, first, the most likely thing
Hmm.
is that they would just die. If you like put a knife that far in someone's brain and just like slice their brain into three sections, is that they would just die.
I
But
was thinking the same thing.
if they did live, theoretically, I think they would be a person very at war with themselves. They would not know.
Mm.
I don't think. I think probably that lizard brain would just take over, Because honestly, if the top sections were not connected to lizard brain, I think
Hmm.
lizard brain would just be controlling everything.
I would agree. I would agree because like if you deconnect it, there'd be no neurons connecting the inner white matter of the brain to the outside gray matter.
Hmm.
It would just
Hmm.
be disconnected. But it seems like it would have a lot of therapeutic uses. Like imagine if you could really separate your two selves. You could be purely logical on one side and purely emotional and functional on the other, and have them actually sit down and have a conversation with each other.
Yeah, I think one of the problems people have when making decisions, and I made a couple videos about this. This was like the like bad decisions you made be a robot and being a robot is good
Hmm.
actually, a couple of videos about when people think, oh, I'm gonna make a good decision later today. They're thinking that when they're in the cool, rational part of their brain, they're thinking with their cerebral cortex. But then
Hmm.
when they get confronted with the bad decision, that thing is going to activate their limbic system, and the limbic system is going to take over. And most people are completely unaware that this process is happening at all. They have no
Hmm.
idea that, like, oh, right now I'm thinking with my cerebral cortex, and then I'm going to be thinking with my limbic system. And that's why I'm saying that the key to overcome bad decisions is to think about how can we have more communication between these two sides? Like when you're planning to make a good decision, how can you persuade your limbic system to go along with it?
How can you persuade your limbic system to go along with it?
Yeah, well, I mean, ways that work are like thinking about the consequences in terms of like visualizing consequences until they affect your emotions. If you're
Hmm.
like, that's why, maybe the written warnings on like packs of cigarettes are not very effective because it's just words. But then they've
Hmm.
experimented with using photographs, and that works a lot better.
Oh.
Like photographs of like cancerous tumors and stuff on packs of cigarettes is way more effective than written words because written words go to the cerebral cortex more so, and photographs go to the limbic brain more.
Oh, that's a really good idea. They should do that for other types of addiction. Like
Yeah.
they put it, wait, what are the major types of addiction? Like they could do it for drinking. They could do it for like condoms. I don't know if that one would be good.
Is that an addiction? I don't know. I feel like people
I mean,
are
it
more
can
addicted to
be.
not condoms than to like it's more of a problem if you don't.
I guess you could do like tattoos then, like on people's to prevent them. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting idea, putting images on cigarette containers. But you
Yeah.
mentioned Neuralink earlier. I want to hear your
Oh
opinion
yeah.
about it. Would you ever get
Oh
an
yeah.
implant?
Would I get an implant? Probably not because the whole point is to connect you to AI, and I think I'm smarter than AI already. I already don't use AI because I
Uh-huh.
can think of better answers than it can. Or maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
just not good at prompts, but I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I am like I was the I before the A. I'm what AI was trained on. AI is just trying to mimic this real thing here. But maybe I don't know. Even so, it would depend what the um I'm not like personally against it, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also not like a super adventurous person in that way of like um the risk of death is too high. That's why at least as it's being used now, it's really being used to like people who lost limbs to be able to control their prosthetic limbs using their brain and stuff. That's super cool. That's super cool. And but I had an idea of and for anyone watching who doesn't know what Neuralink is, Neuralink is a brain implant that is kind of like a microchip that has these little tiny filaments that connect to basically your brain, like your neurons
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, what would be so cool? The mycelium in forests functions kind of like they send electrical impulses across the forest using a mycelium network, which is the like root part of mushrooms, basically. It's a fungal network that interconnects with the roots of trees and uses electrical impulses to communicate across the forest. Things of like, oh, there's a deer eating my branches over here. So I don't know, the weird stuff that trees talk about. I was like, what if there's a way to connect a Neuralink to a mycelium network and you could like talk to the trees through the
Oh.
internet? I feel like because because it seems so similar to the brain and how it works with like just they're both electricity based with little wires, and I feel like that would be super neat.
Yeah, it's completely possible. Have you seen the videos of mushrooms playing instruments based on their electrical impulses?
A little bit, yeah. What do you think about
Yeah,
those?
yeah. So they're fascinating. My best friend at UPenn right now is currently developing neurotechnologies with the goal you speak of. He hopes to be able to merge species. He's creating a general input-output device. So rather than having to get an implant and have invasive surgery, which, like you brought up, is very dangerous. Not very many people want to do that. He wants to, he's creating a market device that he hopes anyone can buy, and you'll be able to place it on the outside of your skull to either stimulate neurons or read synapses. So in the future, we might be able to connect to mycology or even other humans.
That would be so cool. Yeah, because and what I was thinking about is as an application for the forest is what if you could like communicate to trees to get them to grow faster? I wonder if
Oh,
you could be like, hey, we just put this growth hormone and it'll
uh-huh,
allow you to regrow a forest in just 10 years instead of like however
uh-huh.
long it takes. I don't know if that's even remotely possible, but that was a idea that I was like, yeah, it's a cool idea. I have no idea who to tell it to.
No, it seems possible, but it wouldn't, we would have to communicate in such a niche, weird language. We would probably
hmm
just be like stimulating something that's telling the tree to grow because the trees can communicate and say like I have enough nutrients, I'm going to grow more with this area. They help one another. They're a team. So if we were able to stimulate the same patterns in the mycology network, that would be incredible. We could grow forests so much faster.
Yeah. That was that would be super super interesting.
Then, with your idea going back to like the universe was nothing and was everything, and then
hmm
everything began to grow and expand, do you think like trees are conscious and mushrooms and AI?
So how I define consciousness is the ability to process information. I think
Yeah.
consciousness is actually something extremely fundamental. Like I think consciousness is required for the laws of physics as we know it to work. I
Uh-huh.
think the fa physics is basically just information is processed in a predictable way. That's basically
Yeah.
what the laws of physics, in the laws of physics describes the predictable ways that information is transferred and processed. Like when you hit a ball, it transfers the energy. That transfer of energy is actually a transfer of information on a very, very fundamental
hmm
quantum level. So I think the ability to process information, when I say everything is conscious, I mean the universe is fundamentally something that processes information. Because in
Yeah.
order for information to be processed, there needs to be a receiver decoding it.
hmm
And that, like, to get input information and decode it
Yeah.
in some, to me, that's what consciousness is. And then I think there's like simple things that consciousness does, like just the process of being a rock and staying a rock and like and if something hits it then rolling like that is something that consciousness can do. And then more complex systems like awareness of other things
hmm
is just more complicated configurations of the same essential thing.
So if I have a ball and I throw it against the wall, the energy will hit the wall and it will cause vibrations. And
Mhm.
since it is the wall is not really decoding information. It's just changing states.
Well, the fact that it does change states and I don't want to personify it either because I think consciousness of ego is something completely separate. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think the ball knows it's a ball. I don't think there even is such thing as a ball unless we have more complex organisms to say that is a ball and the th other things around it are not the ball.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think there's anything separating like a molecule inside of the ball from a molecule outside of the ball. They're all kind of
Mhm.
the same thing. But just the fact that information can move from one place or state to another and
Uh-huh.
be received. Just the fact that energy can move from one place to another, can move into something that on a just a very, very, very deep level, that information is being received and processed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not
So,
saying that there's an ego consciousness.
yeah, yeah, but just like a fundamental awareness.
Mhm, mhm.
Is the awareness in all of matter, or is it something below the matter and only certain things have awareness?
Well, that's if you could kind of rephrase that as like, is the laws of physics in matter or below matter?
Yeah.
It doesn't, I don't know if it really makes that much sense as much as it's not something that you can cut it open and find where the physics are, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or like if you say like, oh, I have a marble, are the physics
Yeah.
inside the marble or are the physics under the marble or the physics beneath, it's kind of the question isn't doesn't work the same way that the thing does. I think our language just isn't
Yeah, I think
uh
we're using different
sufficient.
definitions.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, so I guess the laws of physics itself, but I don't understand why the laws of physics itself would need consciousness. I see it as a full possibility that like I'm the only conscious being by some weird chance. Like I really don't know if anything else is conscious because I can only experience this one point in the universe at this very moment.
It depends how you define consciousness. So like I was saying, my definition of consciousness
Yeah.
is just very fundamental information processing. And you can see
Okay,
that
fundamental information
I,
processing.
I would say more that the laws of physics describe how information is processed, but they assume that information is processed. And in order for information to be processed, you need a recipient of the information. That on
Yeah.
some base, for, I just define consciousness as being able to receive information. Because,
Oh.
if information is sent, it's possible to send information and have it not be
Yeah.
meaningfully received. Like when your television is picking up static, there could be a TV channel sending Wizards of Waverly Place, and if it's just playing
Mm.
static, it's not receiving that information. But for the TV to be able to play Wizards of
Mm-hmm.
Waverly Place, it is on some very, 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 very fundamental level processing that information.
Yeah.
But if we talk about selfhood, I mean, solipsism is the idea that you are the only self. You could have a you could accept that, okay, the universe clearly has some information processing, but I might
Mm-hmm.
be the only one who is processing a self. And I
Yeah.
think a self is a thing that gets processed
Yeah.
more so than it is a thing that does the processing. Like, I think we are aware of ourselves more than we are ourselves. I think
Mm.
we don't even necessarily exist. We are really a thing that we are watching. Like there might be really only one soul that
Yeah.
is aware of all of these different sources of information. And I think the reason to have all these different sources of information is like the same reason you can't play two shows on the TV at the same time
Mm-hmm.
because you couldn't see either of them. In order
Oh.
for something to exist, to be something, it has to not be anything else than what it is. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why the separation exists, so that for anything to exist, it has to also not be all the things it isn't. And that's where the illusion of separation comes into play. So I think on some deep, deep level, solipsism is true that the self and I think where that intuition comes from is that deep truth. I think it gets kind of mistranslated through the language of
Mm-hmm.
I am the only thing that it. I think it's kind of obvious that we're not the only egos that exist. The fact that other
Mm-hmm.
people say things that surprise us, I think
Mm-hmm.
is kind of proof of that. Anytime someone says something that you could not have imagined them to say is to me very good evidence that solipsism in the ego form is false. But I think on a deep level, we're all the same soul running on different
Yeah.
channels simultaneously.
So, do you see us all as a type of hive mind then?
I think I think the consciousness of the universe is all
Yeah.
one thing. So yeah, I guess as a
Yeah.
hive mind, that could be a way
Do you
to
think
describe
you're
it.
gonna perceive my perspective at some point, the universe itself? Or do you like the
I
theory of the
think
egg?
time, I think time I like the eggs. For anyone who doesn't know what the egg is, I have a video on my channel where I recite the story of the egg. I like that story a lot. I say I believe in it with a little asterisk because I don't think there
Mm-hmm.
is like a unit of soul. I don't think I have a soul the same way I don't have a air or a water. Like the water that's in my body is constantly cycling through it. And you wouldn't just sum up all the water in my body and say that is a thing because it's even as I breathe, water is like moving in and out of my body, and I'm never going to have all the same water molecules twice. And
Mm-hmm.
I think soul is kind of or consciousness or awareness. I think because I think awareness is just a fundamental property of the universe. Like I say, it's kind of the same things as the laws of physics. It's like the fact that the matter that I am made of abides by the laws of physics doesn't mean that like there's just one laws of physics and it's my turn to use the laws of physics and it's you know every molecule is kind of just embedded with the capacity to process information. And I am the sum total of all this capacity to process information, but the molecules that I'm using are constantly in flux. So
Mm.
I don't think reincarnation works so much as like you have one unit of consciousness that stays with you undivided for your whole life, and then when you die, it moves into something else. I think it's more like the air that we breathe. There's these fundamental parts of consciousness that we're just borrowing. And I think that could be even a cool way for karma to work is that maybe the consciousness that's in like the air that you're breathing now, maybe you inhale it and you exhale it, and the person that you're like giving flowers to or stabbing with a knife
Mm-hmm.
is going to have that consciousness in 30 seconds. And so you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get instant karma. That would be a really cool way for it to work. And then
It would be.
the the sense of identity that we're still the same soul throughout time works the same way that we believe that about our body. It's our body,
Mm-hmm.
even if we had different water in it yesterday, that stuff can
Mm-hmm.
move in and out of it. The boundary of ego is semi-permeable. A semi-permeable membrane there.
Yeah, that's all fascinating, really fascinating. We, so I always think about like why am I experiencing this perspective? And we don't really know. And I like how you talked about how the water in my body is not my water, and there's a lot of different possibilities. But I'm curious what makes you certain about your theory of the universe.
I wouldn't say I'm really certain about anything.
Certain?
I
Okay.
just keep theories until I find a better one. And I will say I haven't found a better one yet. I haven't found one that's more convincing to me. I do think that
Oh.
my biggest doubts about the theory are the fact that maybe boredom isn't universal. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the things that make up my experience of consciousness might be unique to mammals on Earth or something like that. That's
Yeah.
definitely something that casts some doubt into my theory, but at the same time, I haven't heard a better one. And I think
Mm.
that my theory lines up with a lot of other theories in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Like for
it
example,
does.
the the idea of the Big Bang and that there was a singularity that was infinitely dense before time and that it
Mm-hmm.
existed before time, that time had not even been created yet. I believe that time is novelty. So in the beginning there was only like the unity of everything in the universe was one thing. And I think on a deeper level it was united with nothingness so that there was no such thing as other. And then that like reality level zero, that's the void. Everything in the universe is united with nothingness, and is neither everything nor nothing, but a secret third thing of like non-being. That's the void. And then maybe level one, reality level one is like oneness, everything in the universe is one thing, and contrasted against infinite nothingness, and where they've everything and nothing have separated from each other to create the first
Yeah.
otherness. And that was the first
Yeah.
separation and that's the singularity before the Big Bang. We still don't really have time yet. We're still in kind of nothing has happened yet.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
time requires things to happen. Basically, time is a
Uh-huh.
measure of novelty. Time is the fact that there's a different that I go into this a little bit more in my video, Does God Exist? But
Mm-hmm.
I think that the idea of this oneness of everything in the universe being contained in this one little ball that in time hadn't existed yet. That's what physicists are talking about the
Yeah.
moment before the Big Bang. And then it's in the Bible too of like in the beginning there was like
Mm-hmm.
nothingness and then God created the heavens and the earth and I think and then the Tao of like there's this infinite nothingness that anything you
Uh-huh.
say it's not that thing because it isn't anything, but it's everything. All of these different traditions seem like they're converging on describing something that is actually
Mm-hmm.
there. So the way I conceive of it, it's my best guess.
Do you have a name for it?
I mean, I like to call it the void. Sometimes I call it God when I'm talking about just like the fact that everything is connected, but I like to call it instead of like he or she or something, because I think it is defined by the fact it doesn't have an ego.
Mm-hmm.
I think the I think having an ego is something that is not a property of it, you know. Like I think if there is a supernatural divine being, it doesn't feel like pride or shame or things like that. I think those are very human things that we kind of paste onto it.
Yeah, I don't think it would care at all. It
Yeah.
seemed like
And I
meaningless.
I really don't think it cares if you eat shellfish.
Do you eat shellfish?
I do. That's like a thing in the Bible that says like thou shalt not eat any lobster. Like I don't
Oh.
know.
Wait, so the purpose of the universe is basically to avoid isolation, to connect with itself?
Right. Right. Because being isolated is lonely and boring. That is my best theory of the
Hmm.
universe, is that the whole purpose of everything is to not be lonely or bored.
Oh. Ah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So are we like going towards a state where we're going to be connected again in this giant mesh and have to repeat it, you think?
I think that is like the cycle of the universe. And
Yeah.
the irony of that is that coming into connection is kind of like the best thing in the world, or like it feels like the best thing in the world. But then
Yeah.
the end goal of that is ultimate unification when there's nothing left to connect
Uh-huh.
to. And that is hell. It's
Oh.
like the the road towards hell like feels really good. So
Yeah, I used to see loneliness as this big fundamental issue that we all face, and many of us do. But then I was speaking to one of my friends that was a monk in Thailand for a long period, and on his journey, while talking to different monks about like isolation and loneliness, because monks, if you don't know, they often go off into the desert and they live alone for their entire lives, living in caves, not talking to someone. So complete isolation. And what he told me was fascinating, that in certain meditative states, you can unlock different forms of levers or forms of buttons that can control your mind. Like monks are able to raise their body temperature and they're able to like melt cold blankets on them, have it steaming. And another thing that they can do is there's a certain lever of the mind, they claim, that you're able to turn off and on for isolation. So if you're able to understand this part of your mind, you would no longer feel lonely, you no longer feel isolated.
well, that, you know what that brings up for me is what we were talking about earlier about how our own brain is split among different levels. I
Yeah.
wonder if in isolation, the desire to connect with something is turned inwards, and we
Uh-huh.
use our desire to connect deeper with ourselves. That the parts of ourselves that we're split off from, like,
Hmm.
for example, being able to control your body temperature, which would be part of the medulla, that your cerebral
Yeah.
cortex is now attempting to connect with other parts of
Oh.
your brain. And that
Hmm.
all of that energy, because we can see there's so much neuroplasticity, like you see when people lose one sense, like if they lose their vision, they can,
Uh-huh.
some people have learned to echolocate because they
Yeah,
take
I've
the
seen that.
neurons, they take the part of their brain that would have been used, the visual cortex of their brain,
Hmm.
and all that brain matter is just kind of like, oh, what should we do now? And their
Hmm.
brain can rewire to use sound to convert sound into images of, like the way that bats do, to echolocate and use sound to hear what things see
Hmm.
like look like around them. So I wonder if basically everyone has, so obviously everyone has the capacity to do this because monks are just regular people put in extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily extraordinary people. They're, everyone is extraordinary if they're put in the right circumstances.
Hmm.
So if they're just using, making these connections that the brain otherwise didn't have a lot of, it was kind of like energetically costly and not a good
Hmm.
use of resources for survival to try to connect with itself deeper. It's taking this part of the brain that would be used for connecting with others and turning it inwards to connect with itself and rewire the connections that it otherwise wouldn't have.
No, I completely agree with you. Like I've personally done silent meditation retreats where you sleep like 5 hours and then for the entire day, like 12, 13 hours, you just meditate in complete silence. And they do different techniques like focusing just on this part of your lip and really turning inwards. And like you said, it does create a deeper inner exploration and it leads to different states of understanding yourself, like creativity. Like there's a lot of different examples of writers and poets throughout history that would love isolation just because of that. They could increase the neuroplasticity of their own mind and allow different networks to communicate. Like Nietzsche, he was known for going into the woods for long periods alone. There's
Hmm.
very much a lot of things we're able to unlock with our mind that modern capitalistic society has no idea about.
Hmm. It reminds me of the movie Lucy. That's one of my favorite movies. Um, totally recommend it.
Oh,
It's about a regular girl who uh gets caught up in some drug trafficking trade for this new substance that kind of turns it's described as like the growth hormone that makes babies' brains develop in the womb, but then when you take it as an
yeah.
adult, it kind of like unlocks your full mental capacity, and she gets like these
Oh,
superpowers. I love that movie. I love that movie
uh-huh.
so much. I've seen it so many times, but
Wait, was it
it's
based on a
basic.
true story?
I don't think so. I think it's really just
Okay.
like a sci-fi movie,
Okay.
but I love it, and it has a lot of things that seem kind of, I mean, it's science fiction obviously, but it does, like
Oh,
being able to look at signs in a different language and
yeah.
understand them. The way it visualizes it is really cool, of like having like holograms. So
Oh,
obviously it's visualized in a way that if this was to happen in real life, this would just be an artistic depiction of what's going on.
yeah.
Or but a lot of the things, there is a lot of actually real science of things that the human body is capable of doing. Like one of the things that's depicted in the movie is, when the body is given an electrical shock, like
Mm-hmm.
when people are put in an electric chair to be executed, they're strapped into it like really hard. And the reason for that is because if they weren't, their body would convulse and throw them across the room in a way that like
Oh,
humans are capable of doing,
yeah.
but just don't, Like, so
That's
humans kind of like
crazy.
are capable of flying
Yeah.
with like electrical impulses. And so it kind of like showed her, like when the drug
Yeah.
was like working its way into her brain, that like gravity kind of stopped working because the electrical impulses on her body were like
Oh.
throwing her like up onto the ceiling the way that
Oh.
someone would be thrown from an electric chair. And I was like, oh my God, that like that happened. That's like a real thing that human bodies are capable of doing. So I
That's
don't know. I
so
really like that
interesting. With
movie.
the future of neurotechnology, things like that will be possibilities.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, think about, I mean, Nikola Tesla had like a way to transmit electricity through the air wirelessly. Even if you
Yeah.
needed like an infusion of electricity in order to like fly,
Yeah.
wireless electricity infusion that
Uh,
is linked to your Neuralink, and then your body can just like, woo, I don't know, cool stuff.
that would be insane. Oh my God. Wait, so going back to your original theory, if we can all unlock this thing in our human brain and isolation becomes kind of like meaningless, what do you think the purpose of the universe would be then?
Well, isolation then would be connection with yourself and
Yeah.
connection with the multiple parts of yourself.
Uh-huh.
So I think the universe, like whether you're looking, it reminds me of it's just which directions your camera is zooming because you can look outwards and you can look at things on a macro level. Like you can look at the planets and like zoom out into infinity, but you can also look on a micro level and like zoom in into infinity
Mm-hmm.
until you're looking at quantum stuff. I think whether you're looking at your relationships with other people or your relationships with yourself, you can use a whole human lifespan to look into or outwards. The
Oh.
reason that we're able to connect with ourselves is that we are not
Mm-hmm.
connected to ourselves. The fact that we are disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
that we are other to ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
in so many of our behaviors, we have different names for this, being at war with ourselves. The fact that we are disconnected with ourselves gives us the possibility for connection with ourselves. So, I mean, if you're asking about like the end point of being completely connected with yourself, I think what would happen then would be a need for disconnection. Like, I
Really?
think you when you reach the end point of being completely connected, then there's nothing left to connect with. And then the drive to connection realizes like it needs to divide again in order
Uh-huh.
to have something to connect with again.
How about just like acceptance? Like accepting that state. Like I'm connected now. Why do I need to repeat this process?
But would your ego even still be there at that point? I don't know. And that well that's where we come to boredom. Like why is boredom a thing? I don't know. And like I said, I'm suspicious of boredom. I don't think it's been studied
Yeah.
enough. I don't think it's been looked like cross species examined well enough. I don't know how much this is just like a mammalian evolution and how much it's a
Yeah.
deep fundamental truth of the universe. But
Uh-huh.
when I was really little, when you're in that stage when you're like 3 years old and all you just go around asking people why because you realize that if you ask someone
Yeah.
why, they will like say something interesting and you can just say why again and they'll get like increasingly frustrated but keep giving you information that you don't really know what to do with, but you're 3 and you're like, oh, this is a power trip. I could just keep asking why. So I did that to my cousin once, who was older than me, and I, I I forget what I was originally asking, but it probably started with like, why do we use tablecloths? And it got down to like, well, why did God create the universe?
Yeah.
Like at some point, my cousin just got like tired of answering questions. He was like, "This all happened because God created the universe," and I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because he was bored." God created the universe because it was bored was like the final answer of like why everything existed.
Oh.
And I'm like, I kind of believe that now. Like I kind of think
Yeah,
like that
yeah. That
might be
really
true.
impacted you.
Yeah. I was like, well, okay, that's why.
I have a
So
very
like now
similar perspective to you.
anytime anything happens, I'm like, that's because God was bored. So I try really in my life because there's so many things you can look at your life and say, is it boring from your perspective? And then is it boring from an outside perspective? Because you might say, when you're bored, you go and scroll on Instagram because that makes
Mm-hmm.
you feel less bored. But if someone was watching you, if your life was a TV show, that would make
Mm-hmm.
your life more boring to watch you
Oh.
do that. So I try to think
Mm.
about boredom not just from the perspective of being in my life, but as how can I make my life less boring if, say, like God was watching it like a TV
Yeah,
show?
yeah.
Because
Uh-huh.
I kind of think that and this is gonna sound blasphemous because I'm using the word God not necessarily in like the biblical sense, but in the way that I conceive of it. That I think you can earn God's favor by knowing what it wants. Like if
Oh.
God hates boredom and loneliness, then you can think,
Mm-hmm.
how can I structure my life to be the most interesting and the most connected
Mm-hmm.
with people? And I think the times
Mm-hmm.
that I've done that are the times I've gotten the most like supernatural miracle assistance,
Mm.
where it just seems like there's no logical, rational explanation for why the stars aligned to protect me in this way. I just know that my quest was like, I rail against boringness and loneliness, and I'm going to seek connection and interesting things. And like the world just opened to me in all those instances. So,
How did the stars align? What was the most like
oh, there
supernatural
was
moment?
so, I mean, some of the stories are just so weird. I mean, one of them was like I was in a car full of like strangers I had just met who were like bringing me to a convention. I hadn't just met. I was in another cult, and I'd met them through the cult. But
Okay. Another
um,
goal.
but I said my name, and my name appeared on a like mayhem, and the word mayhem appeared on a billboard as I like a LED billboard as I said it.
Oh,
As I like
no
I said
way.
I am mayhem, and then an LED billboard flashed the word mayhem.
Mayhem.
And everyone saw it. Like
Uh,
that was probably
uh,
like a very good example of like, and like I could name 100 things that happened like
mm-hmm.
that. Maybe not off the top of my head. I have like a little journal where I've been recording
Oh,
them sometimes. Like some of them are
that's
interesting.
interesting.
Some of them are
Have you
like just
noticed any
interesting to
patterns
me.
throughout them?
I definitely think they're connect synchronicities, like as Jung called them. I think they're very much connected to decisions that you make. Like I actually use
Yeah.
synchronicities as a form of divination to see whether, like, I think if I make a decision that is, I guess, a good decision or like in line with what God or the universe
Hmm.
want, that I get a lot of synchronicities. Like, for example, when
Yeah.
I I went to college briefly. I went to film school briefly. And there was one synchronicity
Oh.
that there was this one particular girl that I would always run into. And it happened so much that it was weird that
Hmm.
we were like, okay, this is kind of like weird. And the day that I made the decision to drop out of college and pursue music and YouTube instead, I was like, I'm gonna
Oh.
go on my own path.
Yeah.
I ran into that girl 9 times that day.
9 times. That's crazy. Are you guys still
Just in
friends?
random places. We weren't even friends. We didn't even know each other. We
Oh.
just ran into each other to the point that it was just her and me. That was the only girl it happened with. We
Uh-huh.
just ran into each other to the point that we were like, this is really weird. Like she was getting freaked out because it was just
Yeah.
the most random thing. But
Uh-huh.
that day when I made the decision, I'm gonna pursue YouTube. I'm not gonna go the regular college degree and like
Yeah,
get a
yeah,
nine to
yeah.
five sort of thing.
I
I'm
like
gonna do
that.
my own thing. The instant I made that decision, after that, I ran into her 9 times that day. And that to me, that's like my metal detector
Hmm.
of, is my decision in line with like the way, like with the
Mm.
Tao? Is it
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
Tao?
yeah.
Because I feel like the closer you get, I feel like every synchronicity, sometimes people go insane if they have too many synchronicities because they don't know what they mean. I don't think the individual
Really?
ones have any meaning. I think they're more like a beep saying that like you're getting closer. Like the closer you are to the river, to the Tao, the more beeps
Yeah.
start going off. And if you kind
Mm.
of count how frequently are these beeps going off, like
Hmm.
there wasn't any meaning about like that girl in particular. It wasn't like she had some quest for me or something. It wasn't about her. It was just a signal to say, "Hey, are you paying attention? This is
Hmm.
like hot. Like this is just like a beep to say you're
Hmm.
going in the right direction." And when you pick up at it on it as like a point of data, it
Uh-huh.
becomes a lot less like, what does it all mean? What is the universe trying to tell me? You can kind of
Oh.
interpret it a lot better.
I wish there was a way to study that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be super pseudoscience, but
Yeah,
I'm
it
sure
would
that would
it
be
would be
a
so hard to get consistent results.
mhm.
So, I really agree with all your ideas, but I have a slightly different opinion on what the purpose of the universe is.
Okay, tell me.
Right now, I am limited based on how much knowledge I have. We're all limited based on the constraints of what we currently know. And because of this, any conclusion I come to is based on what I know. So I think the only way I could truly determine the purpose of the universe is if I learned everything, every point of knowledge, if we were able to be consciously aware of it. I believe that's the only way to determine what the purpose of the universe is with absolute certainty.
Well, like I said, my idea of it is just the best guess, but I would say that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
universal consciousness that is on a deeper level aware of everything, and that our
Yeah,
ego is
yeah.
kind of the part where we're walled off to everything else. We have this suspension of disbelief to
Hmm.
be aware of our own experience so that because otherwise it would be annihilated by being subsumed with everything that it isn't, you know. So the purpose of an individual ego is to collect
Yeah.
data. And
Yeah.
it wouldn't be possible to collect the data as we collect it if we were aware of everything else. Because to be aware
Uh-huh.
of everything else is to dissolve yourself, is to remove the suspension of disbelief. So I think
Yeah,
in a lot
yeah.
of ways, it your theory and mine kind of intertwine in a way that the purpose of
Hmm.
every individual self is to collect data for the universal being that is trying to
Uh-huh.
understand itself.
Oh. Yeah, yeah. I guess it comes down to like I don't know with certainty if there is a universal being. Like for
I
all I
wouldn't even
know,
necessarily call it a being, you know,
yeah.
but that there is, I mean, I think it's either a theory or something that information just doesn't get destroyed. Like
Yeah.
information become like impossible for humans to read, but like
Mm-hmm.
all of the information over the history of time theoretically is still in existence. So I just
How
think that
so?
honestly, I haven't read into it so much, but if you look it up, there's probably more things about it than I can diatribe
Like if
about on the spot.
are you
Like,
seeing like
but there
time
are,
as a dimension?
I mean, I do think that is a dimension. Like, I do think it is like
Yeah.
the fourth dimension is movement across time.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
just
yeah.
if you think of time not as like we experience it as an arrow, as in a linear way, but that every moment in time exists the same way a place in space continues to exist, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where theoretically consciousness could move backwards in time or to any point in time that it just
Yeah.
exists as a plane, that would
Uh-huh.
definitely be a way that information would be stored. There's also the
I
way
agree.
that I mean, there's things like carbon dating where we can use information from an object now to determine information from way back in time. And the idea
Mm-hmm.
is like that would be theoretically possible for to learn everything about everything if you had sufficiently advanced science. So,
Wait, how so? Wait,
well,
the
we don't
theory that we
know how.
could or
So,
couldn't.
the idea that all information is preserved
Yeah, yeah,
is just
yeah.
a thing in physics. That's like
Yeah.
the reason why it's true is a lot more complicated. That like it's a lot easier to say like, oh, in the beginning there was a singularity and then it exploded. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know that? It's like, well, that's a lot harder to say. I like that's a much more higher advanced level of physics. So
Yeah, that was really fun. I love talking to you,
yeah,
Mayhem.
thanks. Yeah, it was great talking to you too. That was fun to explore a lot of different ideas. And it's like, I know we could both talk about them forever and ever and ever, but this will be a good benchmark to see how much attention span my audience has. We'll see. We'll see. Um, but yeah, would you like to plug anything for people to find your comics? You make some pretty cool comics on Instagram. What's the
Yeah, you can follow my Instagram. It's Max's MAXS dot curiosity. Thank you very much
Yeah,
for having me, and thank you
yeah, I'll
everyone for
put it
watching.
in the description. Thank you so much, everyone, for this is my first podcast, and oh, we're hoping all the technology gods bless us.
Wait, let's check
God
the
knows we
recording
had
real
trouble.
quick.
Yeah.